However, this course is not about fundamentals of graphic designing or architectural fundamentals, but I just want to mention quickly a few tips here. If you're already familiar with my teaching style and my workflow, you realize many times I prefer to create my own assets easily with Photoshop instead of searching on and on or pay a lot of money to get assets. To creating assets, a lot of times you need to know at least very few basic steps. First one about shading, and then mixture with perspective. For example, I create a rectangular shape with any color. Alright. And it doesn't have any perspective information. If I press Ctrl or Command T, for instance, I hold on the Ctrl or Command Shift and start giving a bit depth. You see, it is getting more perspective. Alright, I could do repeat similar another box here. Again, Ctrl or Command T, Control Shift here and here. And as you see, it gets kind of perspective, but because of wrong shading, usually it is hard to recognize. So simply, if I change one of these sides color, brighter or darker, for example here, I rather to make it darker. Now, human brain easily could recognize this as 3D geometry. You see, it is very simple. And this is 2 perspective point. You could simply even make it 3 point. Allow me to choose one by one, Control or Command T. I will bring it down. Also this layer, Control or Command T. And you could make your other points. I want to create something like similar 3-point perspective. So a bit more effort. Allow me to be more accurate. Alright. And you could create your last shape. This time even brighter. Okay. Control or Command T, hold on the Control key and start set points. Maybe something like that. And finished. Now we made something similar to 3-point perspective. You see, it is nothing hard. You just need to pay attention to perspective and shading. Also very simple shading and shapes. For example, I enable polygonal lasso, create a new layer, click, 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 click. I prefer to this time use gray color, press Alt or Option Delete or Backspace to create gray. Now this is not so visible as 3D geometry, but if I start deselecting this part, left or right doesn't matter, and make one of sides brighter or darker, you see what's going on here? Now not only we have perspective, we have also shading. And of course creating shadow based on the lighting, it is nothing special. You could just select something like that. Allow me to select. Fill it with any color you like. As I mentioned before, blurring, it is getting more fade, so you could use assistance of tilt shift. But this time I want to show you a quick trick. Allow me to delete the shadow and bring this shape here. I want to draw maybe something like that. Alright, Alt or Option Delete to fill it. If you remember, I told you could go to Filter, Blur Gallery and use Tilt Shift to have more fade and similar to Aerial Shadow. But I want to show you another trick to make similar to this result, because might you don't have access to Photoshop CC. So if you're using older versions, First, convert your shadow layer to smart object. Now go to filter, blur, and simply you could use Gaussian blur. Something maybe like that. Alright. Also, you could apply a bit motion blur. It is nice. Filter, blur, and motion blur. Similar angle, maybe something like that. You see, it's getting like area light. Okay. Now, because this is a smart layer and we have a smart filter, simply select your mask of the smart filters. You could use brush or gradient, black to white or black to transparent, doesn't matter, and start painting something like that. Maybe too harsh, I could drag from outer to get more smooth transition, you see? Now we have much stronger shadow here and less strong here. Okay, now select your layer, and because shadow is getting fade out and far, usually getting brighter because of ambient light, so I could press Ctrl or Command L for levels or Ctrl M for curves, doesn't matter, and make a bit brighter. Alright. If you note that, here is much brighter than here, you see? I'm moving my eyedropper color picker here, just check the right side. It is moving, you see? And this is correct. Also, you could apply all this knowledge to any type. For example, I create a new layer, select elliptical, hold on the Alt Shift and draw a circle, fill it with gray color. Alright, I prefer to create a new layer, white color. You could use even burn and dodge, but I prefer to use simple brush, white color, very less subtle flow value, maybe something about 10 to 15. And soft, start making lighting. You see, immediately it is getting something like 3D geometry. Allow me to make black and white. If you press X from your keyboard, of course you could make darker also here, you see? It is very simple. And something very important, I know this is very basic, but note that I saw many people trying to paint or generate 3D geometry. For example, the light is coming from top left and only highlighting the top left. No. Note that we have a ground here and other objects here. We have some secondary bounce of lights which called ambient light. So always make this side bright too. Don't make only one side, it is not realistic. And now even I could make it more shiny and even less. Alright, you see? It is getting more and more realistic. It is very simple. If it is getting too artifact, just simply click lock transparency, go to filter, blur and Gaussian blur and mix a bit, not too strong, but just something like that will reduce those artifacts. Okay, and of course you could make a simple shadow. Allow me to make it smaller, something like that, maybe. And because light is coming from this side, we have, of course, some shadows like that. Alright, maybe something like that. You could immediately and directly use gradient tool, black to white. And from here to maybe here, you see we have gradient. It is much more realistic than just a solid dark color. It is nice because of ambient light, or we could say more physically secondary bounce lights. It is getting more brighter. And press Ctrl or Command T. Here it is getting far, so it should be wider. Alt Shift Control or Shift Command Option on Mac, make it wider. Maybe a bit here. Alright. And convert it to Smart Object. Filter, blur. You could use blur gallery and tilt shift, or just use simply Gaussian blur, something maybe like that. Alright, and select your smart filter mask, brush, black color, very low value for flow, and slowly start decreasing that. You see? Allow me to undo to see. Perfect. And easily you generated something like 3D geometry. Maybe shadow direction is not so correct. Thanks for watching. I decided to just mention few basic tips here. Always mind those standard things and details to create your final result more and more realistic.